There's one thing that people who land on the spectrum of destructive narcissism always do. And I mean always do. And that's what I'm discussing in today's video. And be sure to stick around till the end of the video because this one is taking a right turn into new territory and you don't want to miss it. I'll be touching on some things that frankly need to be said. Let's dive in. Hello friends, Tamie M. Joyce here, Empowerment Life Coach, specializing in codependency and narcissistic abuse recovery for empaths, scapegoats, and awakening light leaders. Thank you for watching my channel, and thank you for subscribing, by the way. And if you haven't already, please do so now, and remember to hit that bell so you never miss a new video. So let's talk about the one thing that narcissists always do. But first, I want to remind you that when we're talking about people with a destructive narcissist personality pattern, we're talking about people who land on a spectrum or continuum. Now, this continuum goes from someone having empathy impairment and therefore narcissistic traits to some degree, all the way to the DSM-5 antisocial personality disorders such as psychopathy or sociopathy. Now, whether or not the antisocial personality disorder has been formally diagnosed by a doctor of psychiatry is not the issue. There are lots of people out there walking around with undiagnosed personality disorders. The point is, either way, these antisocial personality disorders are on the extreme or high end of the spectrum, the continuum. Now, with that said, no matter where a person with a destructive narcissist personality pattern lands on that spectrum, there's one thing they always do. Not sometimes, not almost always, always. In fact, it's so predictable, once you become aware, it not only becomes so much easier to not take anything these people say personally, or seriously for that matter, it actually becomes laughable in terms of just how predictable these people are. And again, this is true no matter where they land on the spectrum or continuum of destructive narcissism. So what's the one thing that people with a destructive narcissist personality pattern do? They project. More specifically, I like to call it confession through projection, because 99.9% of the time, that's exactly what's going on. In other words, they're projecting all of their disowned subconscious shadow onto you. And what that means is they project all of their own character traits, general attitudes, behaviors, as well as the specifics of their own relationship crimes onto the nearest target and or the person or people who may be endeavoring to either hold them accountable or expose them for who they are and what they've been up to. Now, here's what I mean. The destructive narcissist, psychopath, or sociopath believe the best defense to being exposed for who and what they truly are is to vilify, discredit, and demonize anyone who dares to stand up to or speak out against their toxic, highly manipulative, and abusive ways. When they're not attacking you and attempting to assassinate your character directly, they'll be projecting through what is known as the smear campaign. And this classic smear campaign is easy to spot when you know what you're looking for. Again, it's called confession through projection. And a key thing to remember here is that the more emotionally charged the circumstances and the more high voltage and intense their reaction is at any given time, meaning the more triggered, angry, and rageful they may be for whatever reason, the more projection is going on. Count on it. When they're coming at you in a fit of rage, accusing you of doing or being any number of things that you know full well you don't own, you most certainly are not. There's zero part of you that owns any of it, nor does it in any way speak to the truth of who you know you are. You, my friend, are being projected upon. So pay close attention to what they're saying and know they're fully talking about themselves. Rather than taking it personally or being hurt or confused, take the information for what it is, a full confessional. And the good news is now you know exactly who you're dealing with and what they themselves have been up to. Projection is a defense mechanism, a built-in part of the destructive narcissist personality pattern, and it fundamentally boils down to a person projecting outside of themselves what they carry subconsciously, that they are unable or unwilling to accept, acknowledge, or tolerate about themselves on a conscious level. So as a defense mechanism to protect themselves, their fragile ego and false persona, they project outward, again, onto the nearest target, the very things that they cannot stand about themselves, as well as the very things that they themselves do. All of the personality and character traits that they actually embody get projected and dumped onto the chosen target. It's how deeply unconscious people unburden themselves from the burden of going through life the way they do. Needless to say, with narcissists, it's a heavy load they carry, right? So they project. And they do this on subconscious autopilot, but never more so than when they feel threatened, or when their fear, guilt, shame, insecurities, and deep-seated feelings of inadequacy have been triggered. Now, the truth is, we all do this to some degree, in particular when we're highly triggered. But the difference between a person with empathy and someone who lands on the spectrum of destructive narcissism is that the person with empathy is capable of the level of honest self-reflection and genuine personal accountability necessary to catch themselves and own their own stuff. In other words, an empath will have the emotional and psychological equipment required to be able to take responsibility for and full ownership of their shortcomings, unproductive attitudes, behaviors, mistakes, and transgressions, and then work to fix, heal, improve, and amend these unproductive attitudes and behaviors so as not to cause further harm to others. A narcissist cannot do this. So rather than acknowledge that they have these personality traits, character defects, and or commit these relationship crimes, instead they accuse you of doing and being the very same things that they themselves do and are. For example, when you're married to a person with a destructive narcissist personality pattern, and out of the blue they start accusing you of cheating, chances are good you're being cheated on. Or when a narcissist accuses you of being a control freak, you can bet your bottom dollar they have serious control issues and ongoing power struggles going on in their own life. When a narcissist tells you, for example, that someone is a liar or a bully, you can be sure they are projecting their own dishonesty and tendency to bully others onto the person they're in the process of maligning. To use an example from my own life, we recently had an experience with someone who exploded in a fit of rage when A, it was made clear that they weren't going to be given the opportunity to attempt to intimidate, dominate, or control me, please, and B, had the truth of my experience, not my opinion, but my actual experience spelled out and explained to them in detail. And the result of having the light of truth shone on what they'd rather minimize, lie about, hide, and deny was enough to trigger a fit of narcissistic rage. And in that fit of rage, what came flying out of their mouth had absolutely zero to do with us, but was a classic confession through projection. This person accused us of doing and being exactly who and what they themselves are and have been for quite some time. And the sad part for them is they are fully, fundamentally, and constitutionally incapable of seeing the degree to which they were clearly talking about themselves when slinging all the mud to the degree that they did. But we could see it, plain as day. And as such, we just simply did this and let that shit hit the floor where it belongs. And frankly, I walked away from that experience with nothing but gratitude. Any doubt I may have had about who this person was completely obliterated as a result of their disproportionate, fully irrational, toxic, emotionally violent, and abusive tirade. Again, confession through projection. Thank you for showing me who you are. I'm way better off knowing now as opposed to finding out 10, 15, or 20 years down the track after investing my heart and soul into relationships with what turned out to be unloving, empathy-impaired people who are not at all who they pretend to be. And this, by the way, was in response to my simply saying, I'm not interested in sitting down with you, and this is why. Reasonable, rational, even remotely healthy and sane individuals don't react the way this person did in response to someone having a different viewpoint than theirs, nor do they become emotionally violent and verbally abusive in response to not getting their way. But narcissists do. And here's the message they're trying to send with their disproportionate and irrational tirade. If I can't manipulate, dominate, control, and gaslight you to my own satisfaction, then I will resort to the worst kind of emotional violence I can come up with. One way or another, I will find a way to escalate the issue so I can A, hurt you, or try to, and more importantly, B, blame you for the outcome. That's the intent. Sick stuff, but this is what it is when you're dealing with people who land on the spectrum of destructive narcissism. Everything's fine as long as they're getting their own way, and you don't notice or shine a light on their appalling attitudes, choices, and behavior. But the moment you do, the moment they know you're onto them for real, they lash out like irrational emotional toddlers. In particular, when they realize they're not the one in control. And they'll do so in a way where they can now spend the next 20 years blaming you for the outcome. These are not nice people. Now comment below and let me know whether or not you're finding value in this video, and if so, what is it that resonated most with you? Let me know in the comments section below. And if you'd like to learn more about the possibility of working with me in my 8-week transformational coaching program, the Freedom Class, there is a link in the description below where you can apply to see if you qualify for a free one-on-one consultation with either myself or a member of my team. Another thing to be aware of is that projection and gaslighting often go hand in hand. And if you're not sure what I mean by gaslighting, you can watch this video here and this video here. But suffice to say, it boils down to someone attempting to invalidate your feelings and the truth of your experience, resulting in having you doubt and second guess yourself and your own perception of reality. Here's a really good example of what I mean by that. For those of you who don't know, I'm Canadian. I'm originally from Montreal, born and raised, and I now live in Calgary, Alberta. You've likely heard about all the Freedom Convoy 2022 excitement that has exploded in our country in the last couple of weeks. Now, I'm bringing it up because what's been going on around this protest, which, by the way, is about nothing other than preserving constitutional freedoms and human rights as per the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which is actually the supreme law of the land here in Canada. And regardless of what you believe or whether or not you support the protesters, the reality is what's happening around this movement makes for a really good case study on the subject of projection and gaslighting, and how the two are often so intertwined. All you have to do is bear witness to the vast chasm between the highly distorted and outrageously dishonest mainstream media narrative and what is actually going on in our capital city of Ottawa. The mainstream media, who, in my opinion, is nothing more than a propaganda machine, fully owned and funded by a small group, otherwise known as the ruling elite. If you enjoy being lied to and gaslit, then watch the evening news regularly. You won't be disappointed. We have a number of friends and friends of friends who are quite literally boots on the ground in Ottawa as we speak. So we have it on good authority. Not to mention, you don't have to search long or hard on the interwebs and the socials to get a very clear understanding of the reality of the situation as compared to how the mainstream media is portraying the general climate and the intent of those involved in this massive convoy and protest. The official mainstream media narrative would have you believe this is a violent and dangerous protest led by white supremacists and domestic terrorists who, they say, are flying racist flags, defacing property, causing all kinds of trouble and breaking all kinds of laws, etc., ad nauseum. When in reality, these are hardworking, law-abiding, peace-loving citizens who simply want their freedoms and rights, such as freedom of movement and bodily autonomy, restored. To this point, at the time of this recording, this has been a completely peaceful and law-abiding protest. In addition, our Prime Minister has gone so far as to call the members of this convoy a small fringe minority with unacceptable views. What's most fascinating about this is, who exactly is the small fringe minority in this country? Justin is the leader of a minority government here in Canada. Interesting choice of words on his part when attempting to discredit, demonize, and vilify the people he is supposed to represent and serve. An estimated 1.4 million people were on Parliament Hill in Ottawa on January 29th in support of the Freedom Convoy, and in under 2 weeks they raised over $10 million donated by Canadian citizens. hardly a fringe minority. Further, what gives him the authority to decide what views are or are not acceptable? And when exactly did freedom and human rights and abiding by the supreme law of the land become unacceptable views? He's also gone so far as to call citizens of this country who do not align with the draconian measures and mandates being laid down racist, misogynist, and terrorists. Again, interesting choice of words, all things considered. Then there's the media, telling stories of homeless shelters being terrorized by truckers and protesters, demanding to be fed, and according to the media, stealing food from the homeless. When in reality, the actual polar opposite of that story is true. Canadians came out by the tens of thousands to support the truckers in a myriad of ways, not least of which with truckloads of food and other supplies for them. These truckers have more food than they know what to do with, and have quite literally been feeding the homeless since they landed in Ottawa. But that's not what the evening news will tell you. We don't have a fair and impartial news media here in Canada. What we have is a mainstream media propaganda machine, willing to spin whatever narrative they're told to all day long, no matter how far removed from reality or the truth that narrative may be. Why? Because they were paid 600 million Canadian taxpayer dollars to do so by the minority Liberal government. True story. This is a classic case of projection and gaslighting being used in tandem to narcissistically abuse, in this case, an entire country, and advance a very sinister and malevolent agenda. In case you haven't noticed, friends, this isn't just happening in Canada. The world is being narcissistically abused by super sociopaths, which, in my opinion, is a whole other level of sociopathy. And the sooner we all get the connection and wake up to this reality, the sooner we can heal from the abuse collectively and repair the damage done. My friends, I hope you got some value out of this today. If you liked what you heard, be sure to drop a like and a comment. Let me know what your biggest takeaway was. If you're new to my channel, a very special welcome. Be sure to subscribe and hit that bell to be notified when I post new videos throughout the week. And again, if you'd like to learn more about the possibility of working with me in my 8-week transformational coaching program, the Freedom Class, there is a link in the description below where you can apply to see if you qualify for a free one-on-one consultation with myself or a member of my team. As always, I will leave you with this. Know your value. Know your value and unlock your freedom. Mwah! Much love. Bye for now.